In this video, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about Node.js to create your first full stack application on things like advanced routing, how to send data from the backend to the front end and front end to the backend, and a lot of other important information. So make sure they watch this whole video. And before we get started, make sure they leave a like, subscribe so don't miss upcoming Node.js projects and other videos on this topic. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you have any video suggestions. But now, let's get started. We're going to start by creating a folder. I'm just going to call it Node.js and let's open it with terminal. So I'm going to right click, press on open in terminal, and here's where we're going to initialize our project. And so Node.js is going to allow us to use JavaScript to write command lines for server-side scripting. And we're going to be using Express with Node.js, which is going to be a backend web application framework for building RESTful APIs with Node.js. So they're going to be working together, and Express is going to make it a lot easier for us. And to initialize this project, what we're going to do is write npm init-y because we want to skip all of this stuff right here. And we're going to open this in VS Code just to see what it looks like. So currently we only have our package.json and we still need to install 3 dependencies. So let's just open this in terminal and start by writing npm install. The first one is going to be Express, which is what I just went over. Second one is going to be nodemon, which makes it a lot easier for us to run the server. So nodemon. And so what it does is every time we make a change and save, we don't have to stop and run the server again. It does all of that for us. So every time we save, it's going to restart the server for us so that we don't have to do that. And then the last one is going to be EJS, and you're going to see what that does when we get to it. So once you see all of our dependencies installed, we can go to the script and create our own script. So let's go ahead and remove the test. I'm going to call it server. And then what we're going to do here is write nodemon server.js. So now in our folder here, we have to create our server.js file where our server is going to be. To run the server, we have to add some code first. And to do that, we're going to start by creating 2 variables. The first one is going to be called Express, which we're going to require from Express. The next one is going to be app, which is going to run this Express function. So we can see that it's going to be this function right here. Then we can make another one, which is going to be the port that we're going to be running it on so that we can change it whenever you want to. So 3000. And then we actually have to listen to this port. So we're going to use this method called listen by writing app.listen. And then in here, we're going to use our port, or you could just write it. So 3000. But I'm just going to write the port since we already have a variable for that. Then in here, we're going to run a callback function where let's just console log server running on port, and it's going to be on port 3000. So let's write our variable in here and see what it looks like. So if we write npm run server, wait for it to start, we can see that it says that our server is running on port 3000. And we can also add the URL under this text right here, so we won't have to manually open it. We could just press on that. So let's write http and then localhost, and then in here we're going to write our port and see what that looks like. So there it is. If you hold Control and press on it, it's going to open that window. And I'm going to actually put it under so that it looks nicer. And there it is. I'm going to put them both like this. And the first thing that we see is it says cannot get. And to fix that, we're going to use another method, which is where we're going to be sending the users to, depending on the URL that they're on. So we're going to write app.get, and then in here, this is going to be the default URL. And then in this callback function, we can actually get 2 variables. First one's going to be request, second one's going to be response, and you can also get another one, which is going to be next, but you're almost never going to use it. So we're just going to move it. And if we save and reload, we can see that it's stuck on loading because we haven't told the server what to do once the user gets to this URL. So we actually have to send a response. So response.send. And then in here, you can write whatever you want to. So let's just write hello world. I'm going to fix that. Hello world. And now we can see that it works. We can actually return an HTML file. But to do that, we first have to create it inside a folder called views. So let's go ahead and here and write index.html. I'm going to create this basic bone structure. And in here, let's just create an h1 that says homepage. And in the server, instead of using send, we're going to use render. And it's going to be our index.html file, and we can see that it's not going to work because we're going to get this error that says no default engine was specified. And so that's where our EJS comes in. So if we go in here and write app.set view engine, which is exactly what we need. So the engine, we set that to EJS. reload, we can see that we still have an error. And that's because this has to change to EJS. And now if we reload, we can see that all of the errors go away and our index file actually loaded. And if we change anything in here, so let's add an HR and reload over here, we can see that the HR gets added, and then anything else that we add also gets added in here. And just to show you that we can create more of these, let's go ahead and just copy and paste it and change the URL to something different here. So let's just say test, and it's going to return the index.ejs file in here. So it's going to be the same thing. So it was in dashboard for some reason, but here's going to be the home page. And if we go to test, we can see that it's still going to be in home page, even though that the URL is different. And there's also different types of ways that we can write the URL. So let's just say that we had users, and let's create a new file in here. So let's just say users.ejs. I forgot about that. .ejs. Homepage, we're going to change to user. And let's actually change this to user 2. This is also going to be user. And in here, we're going to pass in a wrap parameter by adding a slash column and then the name, which is going to be ID in this case. We can console log the request.params.id and see what we get. So test is not going to work anymore, but if we go to user and then anything else after, it's not going to work because I forgot the slash before the colon. But now we can see that we're going to get this ASDS, which is going to be what we passed in here. And when we render, we can actually pass in one more thing. So we're going to be rendering this index file. So let's change that to user, which is going to change this. And we can pass in here whatever we want to. So we can pass in this request.params.id, which is going to be the ID. So I'm just going to call that ID. And if we go to users here, there's got to be a way to actually get that data. And this is where EJS comes in. So we have to use special tags. And the first one is going to be the less than sign in here, and then a percentage sign. And we can see that I have these suggestions, but you're not going to have them. And that's because you have to go to extensions, right? EJS, and you're going to be able to install this extension, which is going to help you with that. So I'm going to close this. So in here, we're going to write less than percentage sign. And we're going to have to use this tag output value, which is going to output the ID. So it's just going to be ID. And now if we reload, we can see that it's going to write exactly what we have in the URL over here. So let's just say user ID and then something like this. So let's reload this. User ID is going to be that. Let's just say user ID was Bob. We can see that that changed to Bob now. So anything that we write after the users is going to be the ID, and you can use this however you want to. And I'm going to actually open the EJS docs and find exactly what we want. So this is going to be the tags that we're going to be using. And the ones that we're going to use the most are going to be this scriptlet tag, which is going to allow us to actually run code in there. Then we're going to have what we used. So this is going to be the value that we're sending. And then we're going to have the plain ending tag. So in here, when we're using the tag right here, we can write anything that we would want our backend to do. So things like calculations, for example, 5 times 5, that would send it to the server and then it would calculate it. Reload, we're going to get 25. And you can write whatever you want in here. So you can write calculations, or you can write anything that you've sent in here. So we have ID, but if we sent another thing, let's just say a user, which was Bob as an example. If we go back in here and write user, reload, we're going to get Bob. But now if we wrote something that doesn't exist, so let's just say hello, we're going to get an error. And to fix that, what we could do is write locals.hello. And what this is going to do is check if this actually exists. And if it doesn't, it's just not going to show anything and we're not going to get an error. So if it doesn't exist, we can just say user ID doesn't exist. And let's remove this equal sign. So currently we have user ID doesn't exist, but change this to ID. If we reload, the ID is going to be Bob, or we can change that to something else, like let's just say a few numbers. So user ID is that, but let's just say we made a mistake here and we roll I, reload, we can see that user ID doesn't exist. So this is going to be a really nice feature to know when you run into problems like this, and it's going to help you have cleaner code. But now let's actually go back in here, the server, and let's return an actual object. So in user, here we're going to have an array of users. Here we're going to have user 1, then we're going to have user 2, user 3, and then user 4. And let's just say that we wanted to render all of them without having to write stuff like paragraph, arrow, percentage sign equal to users, and then using the first one, and so on. But you've probably thought about using a for loop, but how do we do it with EJS? And so this is where the scripted tag comes in. So we write this and then the percentage sign. And in here, we would start by writing our users.forEach. We would have user. We're going to create a paragraph, and this is not going to be users anymore, but user. Now, if we save that, go in here, we're going to have an error. And that's because we need to have an ending and a closing on each line. That's not an element. So over here, we can see that we have our opening tag, closing tag. Here we have an element, so we don't need that. And then here we have our opening and closing again. But now if we save everything, we can see that we're going to get all of our users. And you could have styled it however you want to. And this obviously doesn't have to be for users. This could be for posts. So let's just say we change this to post. Then we'd have post 1, post 2, and then each post would have some details and so on. And there's actually a few other methods that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Express documentation here. So if we go to guide, we can go to routing, and here we can see that we can also use a post method. So for that, what we can do is create a form, and then once we submit it, all the values are going to be sent to our server, and then we can do something with it. So we can save it to the database that we don't currently have, or we can do something else with it. So to do that, let's actually fix all of this stuff, or not fix it, but change it. So let's just set the path to be user without the ID. Then we're going to change this to users. Let's see if that works. So if we go to user, reload, and everything works now. So let's also make an object, which is going to be all of our users. So let's just say const users, or we could just set that to be an array with all of the names. So user 1, user 2, user 3, and so on. Then in here, we're going to be passing this array of users. And what we're going to be doing is every time we submit a new value in the users here, we're going to be adding it to the array, and it's going to add it in here. So to do that, we first have to make a form where the action is going to send it to the user, and then the method is going to be post. Then we're going to have to add an input, which is going to be with the name of user, ID. We can also set that to user. Then we're going to have a submit input, so submit. And if we reload, we can see it in here now. Let's go back to the server, and we have to add a post method. So under this, we can write app.post. It's going to go to user with a request and response. And in here, we're going to get all of our values. So for that to work, we actually have to install another dependency. So if you write npm I, this one's going to be called body-parser. And now we have to create a variable for that. So const body-parser. We're going to require that from body-parser. And under the set view engine, we're going to write app.use. This is where we tell our app to use this body-parser. So body-parser.url encoded. And then we're going to set extended to be true. Now if we go to the post, if we write console log request.body, we're going to be able to see the value that we're going to be sending from the input. So if we write user 5, press on submit, we can see that we're going to get an object that says user 5. And the name is going to be dependent on the name that we set here. So if we set this to be name, reload, submit this again, we can see that it's going to change to name. I'm going to change this back to user. Let's say we had another input, which was for password or username, or we can also set that to be the age. So let's change this to be number. The name was going to be age. And now if we reload everything, we're going to have two inputs. One is going to be for the name, user 5, and then let's set this user 5 be 5 years old. If we press on submit, we're going to get two values in here. The first one's going to be the user. Second one is going to be the age. Let's add two labels. This one is going to be for user, and then this is going to be the name. The second one is going to be right over here, and this is going to be for age and age. I'm going to add a break in here. There it is. Obviously, it doesn't look too good because we haven't added any CSS. And let's also add a break here before the submit button, so over here. And you can style it, of course, if you want to. And here, since we're returning the name of the user and the age, let's also do that over here. So we're going to have an array of objects. First one is going to be the name, which is going to be Bob, and Bob is going to be 20 years old. Now I'm going to copy this and paste it a few times. And now if we go back in here, we're going to be sending users. And if we reload, we're going to get objects in here. So we have to go back to our for each. Let's make a div with the user.name. If we reload, we're going to have all of the names. And then let's also add their age over here. So user.age. And let's also add an HR under each user. So under the div, if we add an HR and reload, it's going to look a bit nicer. And now if we actually write a few values in here, and an age is just going to be 5. We're going to get it submitted, and in the server we have to add it to the array of objects. So let's go to the post method over here, and then we can create a new user here. So const user is going to be request.body, and then we're going to be pushing that to the array. So users.push user. But now if we actually write a name and then set the age and press on submit, we can see that nothing happens, and that's because over here we haven't told the server what to do with this information or where to go. So currently it's waiting for a response. So we have to write response.redirect, and then we're going to be redirecting the user to the user. And we also have to do one more thing because this is not going to work. So we have to set the name to be request.body.name or user, because that's what we set the input to be, and then the age to be request.body.age. But now if we reload, we can see that it works. And even if we change the URL to something else, so let's just set it to here, we're going to go back to home. But if we go back to user, we can see that this user is still here because we haven't stopped the server and it's still working. But if we go to terminal, I'm going to open this guy right here. If we stop it, start it again, and reload, we can see that our user is gone. So this is where a database would come in to save all of the users, which I'm not going to go over in this video, but I will make a separate video on that. But now let's just say that we had a lot of different methods for the same route. So we could have app.delete, then the URL would also be user with the request and response. And then we would also have app.put, same URL, then we would have app.patch, same URL, and hopefully get the point. If we have a lot of methods for the same URL, we can see how messy this could get pretty fast. And this is where router comes in. So we can export it right over here. And that's going to be coming from express.router. Then down here, we're going to write app.use and then router. And now we can use it. So if we comment all of this out and write router.route, and that's where we're going to be setting the route to be user. Now we can use all of our methods without having to write the same route over here. So if we write get, we can have our request and response. Here we can render our page with our users over here. So if we reload everything, we can see that it still works. But now we also have to add our post method, and I'm going to space this out a little bit more so that it looks nicer. Now we have our .get. Then we could have our post method with the request and response. And in here, I'm just going to copy everything and I'm going to uncomment all of this. And now if we try adding a new user, so let's just say Bob and then 80 years old, we're going to have an error. That's because it put the app.use router above the body parser. So let's fix that. I'm going to go back in here, reload, set this to Bob again, 80 years old, press on submit, and everything works now. And so now that we have our route for user, we can have other methods. So let's just say delete, and then in here we could delete the user, then we could have our put, and then we could also have our patch over here. And we can see how much cleaner and nicer it looks now. Now we can make this even cleaner by making a folder called routes. And in here we can create a route file for every single route that we're going to have with a lot of different methods. So I'm going to actually go ahead and add these two methods that we're not going to be using, but this is just going to be an example, of course. So in routes, this one is going to be called user.js. And here we're going to have to require express again to use router. So const router, and it's going to be coming from express.router. Then we're going to copy all of this, or I'm just going to cut it because we're not going to use it here anymore. So we can paste it in here now. Then we also are going to need the users. So I'm going to cut it, paste it right in here. And then here we're going to have to create a variable for this user.js. So we also have to export it. So module.exports. And we're going to export the router. Now if we go back in here, I'm going to go to the very bottom and we can create a variable for that. So we can call it router, require routes from user, and then we're going to have to write app.use router. And we're going to get an error because I forgot to remove the router from there. And now everything's going to work. So the name, let's just set it to something random, age 123, and everything is going to work again. But the problem of having the name here to be router is if we have a few other ones, so we have one for user, we could also have one for posts and so on, we can name all of them routers. So we would name this one user router, capitalize that, so user router, and then we would have user router here. Then we could have one for posts, and then we would name that one posts router, and then this would be coming from posts, which we don't have. So hopefully that makes sense. And if we reload, change everything, I'm going to set this to be user, and everything is still going to work. And before we move on to middleware, there's one more thing I want to go over, which is going to be this users array. Since currently we can only use it in this user.js file, and we can't use it in the server if we ever needed to. So there's a few ways in which we can fix that. We can go in here, and I'm actually going to rename the router here to user router, and you'll see why in a second. This too, and then we're going to export it here too. We can also export the users in here, so let's go ahead and do that. So users, and if we go in here, we're going to get an error, and that's because we have to fix this right here, and everything is still going to work now if we try. But we also have the users. We could go back in here, console log it. So now if we write something, same with the age, we have a new user, but if we go back to here, we're going to get all of the users, including the new user that we just added. So this is how we can get the users, and now you can pretty much do anything you want with them. For the middleware, I'm going to make a copy of the index.js, rename that to dashboard, and we're going to rename this to dashboard, and we're going to change that to dashboard 2. Let's see if that works, or first we have to write the app.get, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's write dashboard in here, and then change this to dashboard also. Let's see if this works. So dashboard, there's going to be our dashboard page, and now we're going to go over middleware. So middleware is going to be code that runs before the page loads in, which is a really nice feature because we can check if the user is logged in when we go to authorize pages. So let's just say that we had a function called const is user logged in. We would get a request, response, and a next here. This is where we're going to be using next, and here would be checking stuff like, and let's just say we had an object here called user, which would have a few values, and it would be equal to null if it didn't exist or the user wasn't logged in. We would be checking stuff like that here. So if user, then we could write next. Else, what we're going to do is we're just going to redirect the user to log in or do something like that. So before we do that, let's just do response.send login first, or any text like that. And now we actually have to add this middleware. Before we add this middleware, I'm going to create a copy of this just to show you something. I'm going to call this middle, and here we're just going to console log middleware to see how all of this works. So if you put this at the very top, so right over here, we're going to write app.use, and then here we're just going to write middle, which is going to be the function. And this does have to be a normal function, so let's fix all of that, or else it wouldn't work. So if we reload the dashboard page, we're going to get our middleware, and the page is going to be continuously loading, which is why we need the next function here, which is going to load the page. But now if we go to any other page, we're still going to get middleware. If we go to user, we're still going to get middleware. As we can see right here, every time I reload, we're going to get a new middleware, and that's not what we want. We only want to have our middleware and routes where our user has to be authorized, like the dashboard. And so to fix that, we could put the dashboard at the very bottom under our user router and then our app.get over here. So let's remove that and then put it under all of our routers here. I'm going to copy this too. Paste this under the app.get, and then let's also do the same with this function. So we're still going to have the middleware because we have to put the app.use above the dashboard where we want to have our middleware. And now if we reload, we can see that we're not going to have it on any pages other than the dashboard. So if we go to the home page, no middleware, but if we go to the dashboard, we can see that our middleware works. So now we can change that to is user logged in, and I'm going to change this back to a normal function. So let's fix all of this. Now we can remove this middle function, and then we're going to write is user logged in. So now if we reload, we can see that everything is going to work because we currently have a user. If we set this to null and reload, we're going to get login first. So now that we have this middleware that checks if the user is logged in, we can redirect the user to login or any other page that we would want. And you can really do anything with this. So it doesn't have to check if the user is logged in. It can do other stuff, but this is just going to be a very simple example. And the last thing I'm going to go over is going to be on how to render static HTML files. It's going to be really quick. So I'm going to comment out all the stuff that we just did, including the dashboard. So let's just comment all of this out. And then in here, I'm going to comment this out too. We can keep the user router, or you can remove that if you want to. And so in here, if we write app.use, since it's also going to be middleware, we can write express.static. The folder is going to be called public, and any HTML file inside of that folder is going to be statically rendered. So if we write public, and the main file is going to be index.html. Here, let's just write index.html. You can write whatever you want in here, and we go to the default path, we can see that we're going to see this index.html file. If we change anything here too, so if we write homepage, reload, it's going to change to homepage. If we add another file, let's just say this one was user.html. I'm going to copy everything from here, paste it in here, and we could write user page. Now if we add user.html, we can see that this page is going to open. And so this would be pretty useful for when you need a page that doesn't need any backend, because you can always add an href that would go to the dashboard, or let's just say user, because that's the only page that we currently have running. So if we reload, go back to the index.html, or this is going to be a link. So go back to user.html and press on this. We're going to go back to the page with the actual backend. So if we write anything here, we can see that this gets added into the list of the users inside of the server. And so this is going to be for this video. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe so you don't miss upcoming Node.js projects. Comment down below if you want to see any specific videos on Node, or if you have anything else that you'd like to say. And hopefully see you in the next video.